Tonight, life beyond level 0 beckons. The First Minister confirms most COVID restrictions will end on Monday, but don't bin your face masks yet. Some measures are here to stay.
I'm not going to shout freedom from this virus because I think it misleads people. The virus is circulating. The risk of new variants is there.
All businesses can reopen. Contact tracing will continue, but double vaccinated close contacts will no longer have to self-isolate. But for schools, the wait goes on. Restrictions will stay when pupils return after the summer holidays. Our national shame following horrendous drug death figures, a promise of action to help people who've been let down. And in sport, another day of medal success at the Olympics, with silver for Scots in cycling and sailing. Good evening, I'm Norman Macleod, and this is the STV News at 6, live from Aberdeen. The end of the world as we know it, at least as far as most COVID restrictions are concerned. After 18 months of living through extraordinary circumstances and unprecedented conditions, life is to return to near normal. From next Monday, we move beyond level 0, meaning a whole host of legal COVID restrictions are lifted. All businesses will be allowed to open and social distancing will be ditched. Some things will remain though. Face masks will continue to be mandatory indoors. Testing will continue and the push to get everyone vaccinated will go on. In a moment, we'll look at how this impacts on business and schools across the country. But first to our political editor, COLIN MACKAY, who's outside the Parliament in Edinburgh this evening. COLIN, a big day and a crucial day for Nicola Sturgeon. A lot going on and a lot happening in the next few days as well.
This is quite a moment really, isn't it? Pretty much the end of most of the COVID restrictions in Scotland. Who would have predicted a week ago that we were about to see the reopening of nightclubs, even if you'll have to wear your mask while you're dancing, because, as the First Minister made clear, this pandemic is not over yet, so masks will continue to be a thing for some time to come in Scotland. So will giving your details to test and protect when you go into a premises. But a couple of weeks ago, they scrapped all the restrictions in England. Now there, the case numbers have continued to fall, just as they have been doing in Scotland. So on Monday, the restrictions that have been in place, most of the restrictions that have been in place for pretty much 18 months now, will be lifted, as Stephen Brown reports.
Since March last year, Tony Cochrane's nightclubs have been silent, but from next Monday, they can finally reopen.
It's a year and a half of closure of something you did every weekend of your life, and suddenly it just come to a standstill. It was even more hard for the staff who, you know, this is part of their life coming every week. It's also the financial impact. I mean, we struggled heavily. We have 11 clubs, so you multiply the problem times 11.
It's not been the greatest. It's been 16, nearly 17 months and no work. It's been that length of time furlough. Trying to find another job to cover has just not happened at all.
From the 9th of August, most of the restrictions we've been living under will go. Physical distancing will end in most places, no businesses will be forced to close, and there won't be a limit on household gatherings. But masks will still be mandatory, home working is still advised, limits on large organised events, and a warning that local measures might be needed in the future.
I think it's good news. I think keeping the face masks definitely is the right way to go. I think throwing them away it just wouldn't be right at all.
I'm a frontline doctor and I've been working in ICU looking after COVID positive patients this year. I think the fact that we're keeping face masks is incredibly important.
Contact tracing will remain in place, but with businesses struggling as close contacts have to isolate, there will be a change.
An adult who is identified as a close contact of someone who has tested positive will no longer be required automatically to self-isolate for 10 days. Instead, if someone is double vaccinated with at least 2 weeks since the second dose, and if they have no symptoms, They should get a PCR test as soon as possible, and if the PCR test is negative, self-isolation can then be ended.
We've now moved beyond level 0. Again, people would rightly assume this means that COVID restrictions have been dropped, but still curbs remain in place. Yet again, the goalposts have been moved.
The vaccine rollout has driven our way out of restrictions. Today it was confirmed that the government is preparing for booster jabs and for possible COVID certificates to be used in Scotland.
You're saying we're going to try to reopen nightclubs, really high-risking settings, to remove distancing, to get back to more economic activity. And the question is, can vaccines and testing together do the heavy lifting and let us lift some of these blanket restrictions? And so I think, yes, many parts in the States are looking at us and saying, with the kind of uptake that we've had, extraordinarily high, especially in older age groups, is that enough? And the hope is right now, with the numbers we have declining, it will be enough.
Hospitality venues like cafes and pubs will still need to continue to take our details, but relaxing the physical distancing will make a real difference. At Dundee's Transport Museum, they're hopeful of the months ahead.
It means that we can have more volunteers working, we can have less home working. For our events, we can, the public can feel a lot more comfortable. We don't have to worry about capacity, we don't have to worry about online booking so much. And in the museum itself, in the cafe, we can put the tables closer together again. I guess we can build back the sense of community that's been lost from having to stay away from each other.
This is the closest to normality that we've seen in a year and a half. More freedoms, yes, but still the watchword is caution. Stephen Brown, STV News.
Well, a short time ago, COLIN MACKAY spoke to Professor Linda Bald to gauge her reaction to the latest changes.
Caution has been the First Minister's watchword in terms of restrictions over the last 18 months, but she's been much bolder today. Professor Linda Bald, has she thrown caution to the wind to some degree?
I think there's a lot of mitigation still in place. It's actually contrast to some of the approaches down south. We know that face covering is still required, and also I think the rules around, still working from home if you can and that kind of thing. Those are important differences, but it's a big shift. I mean, let's face it, nighttime economy opening up. These are risky environments. I think we're going to have to really monitor the situation over the next few weeks.
Because the pandemic's clearly not over. 9 deaths in the last 24 hours. Are we opening up too fast, do you think? Is she going too far just now?
So if you were only looking at this from a public health perspective, you would vaccinate all adults with both doses, you would give vaccines to teenagers, and then you would make the shift. But, there's lots of other harms that people are thinking about. Public health is not the only priority. So all governments around the world have got to find their own way through this.
And the schools are about to open up. Why aren't we vaccinating teenagers, secondary school pupils?
Well, it'll be interesting to hear if we see a change in advice to JCVI. I look around the world at the other high-income countries that are doing this. I'm not persuaded that their teenagers are different from ours. So I really hope we will see that shift. I think it would reassure young people and parents and carers.
The First Minister took some criticism from the opposition leaders today about the message. Is the messaging clear enough on public health at the moment, do you think?
It's been muddy most of the way through. I think policymakers have tried to communicate what people can and cannot do, but the thing you need to recognise, or we all need to recognise, is that there are different groups in the population. There are those that will welcome this change and really take full advantage of it, and others that will be very concerned and cautious. And whether we're giving enough reassurance to those that are clinically vulnerable, I'm not sure.
Because that's the point. Some people will be terrified of today's announcement. A lot of people will be delighted, but some people will be terrified.
I think the point is that the messaging has been that the virus has not gone away. They can also see that you're not fully protected with both doses of the vaccine. So of course those people will be concerned. I think we really need to make sure that we address their questions and concerns and provide them with some protection. And that's why all of us wearing a face covering, for example, and distancing when we can is going to be important.
Professor Bald, thanks for joining us on the STV News Tonight.
While it's all changed for most of the country on Monday, teachers and pupils will have to wait a bit longer before any major changes come into force in schools. Face masks for secondary pupils and social distancing will still be required for 6 weeks when schools go back. But changes to self-isolation rules mean the blanket isolation on whole classes will no longer be routine. Here's our political reporter, Laura Alderman.
You've got a forward forward stroke. Yep, everybody's doing forwards.
Before taking to the water, preparation is key. But these young people from the Citadel Youth Centre in Leith are also preparing to move from primary to high school in just a few weeks' time. And there's more than the usual first day nerves on their minds.
I don't like wearing face masks. It's very hard to breathe. So I don't want to wear a face mask.
It will be different from primary school because in primary school we didn't really have to wear masks. But apart from that, I'm not too worried about it.
And there's hopes there'll be less self-isolating this time round.
We done homeschooling for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, which was really a struggle because the Wi-Fi, everyone in the house is using Wi-Fi, so that impacts our learning as well.
They'll have a new school, new friends, and now new COVID rules in the classroom too.
If a young person aged 5 to 17 is identified as a close contact, they will need to take a PCR test, but they can end their self-isolation if they test negative. Children under the age of 5 will be encouraged but not required to get PCR tests. This means that the blanket isolation of whole classes will no longer be routine.
However, for the first 6 weeks of term, children over 12 will still have to wear face coverings in school buildings, and staff must maintain a 1 metre distance from adults and pupils. It's had a mixed response amongst some parents and students.
Children weren't then turned into cases after they had self-isolated, so a lot of parents felt, that was a bit of a waste, obviously. It has affected every single year, but just in different ways. It has been very disruptive.
Teachers say the changes offer a degree of reassurance, but are still urging caution.
In schools, we've got 6 weeks before anything is going to change. It gives us a chance to work out what effect schools going back is going to have on the numbers and positive cases.
Glad to hear about the CO2 monitors. I think that's very welcome. I think that's a very positive step. So what we need now is clear guidance on how we use these monitors. I hope that we see them in school soon.
Only children aged 12 to 17 who are deemed to be vulnerable are currently being offered the COVID vaccine.
How do you feel about going back to the classroom when the majority of children won't be vaccinated?
I'm not concerned for myself, but I do worry about children who are either clinically vulnerable themselves or are living with an adult who's clinically vulnerable. I feel that they need some more protection. Also, I haven't heard any mention of what protections will be in place for children and families from the Black and minority ethnic communities who we know are more vulnerable to COVID. I feel like they've been missed out in this announcement.
School staff and pupils are being asked to continue doing lateral flow tests at home just before and during term time. It's hoped these changes will bring some normality back to the classrooms and steady the waters when the school bell rings next. Laura Alderman, STV News.
Well, let's go back to our political editor, Colin MACKAY now. So, big news from the Parliament today, but this wasn't the only thing on the agenda, Colin.
No, we had the good news of the easing of the COVID restrictions from the First Minister, but then we had the Drugs Minister, Angela Constance, responding to the horrendous drugs deaths figures, 1,339 drug-related deaths last year. Today she described that as our national shame, and you remember that comes after the First Minister at the STV election debate said that she had taken her eye off the ball on this. Well, that was the accusation that the opposition leaders threw back at her today. They were angry that she wasn't making that statement to Parliament today, as well as the one on COVID.
Behind all those shocking statistics are lost loved ones and broken families. When is the First Minister in this government going to wake up? When will she stop abandoning our communities? When is she going to listen to those on the front line?
I'm extremely disappointed that this statement is not being delivered by the First Minister today. Nicola Sturgeon could not escape the fact that she and her party have been in government for almost 15 years, that she cut the budgets for drug and alcohol services, and that under her watch, our drugs deaths in Scotland are almost 5 times that of the rest of the UK.
This is a public health emergency, and that we can't arrest our way out of a drugs death crisis, and that we need to be reducing demand for drugs as well as the supply.
We've also had the highest number of drug misuse deaths in England and Wales for almost 20 years announced today, but nothing compared to those in Scotland. So from the Scottish Government today, humility. From the opposition, condemnation. I think this now brings it to something of a political head. That's probably what campaigners want to see, because now what they want to see on this, after all the harsh words on both sides, is action. And it might also come up tomorrow because the Prime Minister is in Scotland. He'll be having meetings. I think it may come up at some of them, but it won't come up at a meeting with the First Minister because I told you last night about her invitation. Well, he's declined that offer.
Oh dear. Colin, many thanks. Thieves are using high-tech methods to target Scotland's farming sector with equipment and goods worth more than £1.7 million stolen in the past year. Now farmers are working with police to crack down on rural crime. Here's Nicola McCalley.
The quiet of the countryside, but Scotland's farms and agricultural buildings can often be the victims of crime. The pandemic's seen a 25% drop in rural theft, but there were still offences to the cost of £1.7 million in 2020. Nairnshire farmer Willie Lean had £14,000 worth of equipment stolen earlier this year and believes those responsible were staking out his premises before returning to carry out the robbery.
They'd unscrewed the window of the shed, the panelling, to gain access, but that was done 2 or 3 days prior to the break-in. And then 2 days after that, they returned to our neighbours and took 100,000 of chemicals plus a van through the night. So pretty organised.
The theft had an upsetting effect on the family.
The impact was huge. It was right beside us. It made us feel all really, really frightened. It had the kids totally unnerved. It made me feel really vulnerable.
Police say criminals who target farms and agricultural properties are becoming ever more sophisticated, and they're urging anyone out and about in the countryside to take note if they see anything suspicious.
Many farmers are making their farms more secure, but it's making the thieves at the same time are up in their game. They'll watch and watch and watch. They'll watch farms for quite a few hours, and many hours, and watch where the quad bikes have been kept. They'll watch where the tractors are going. They'll watch the weak points, and when somebody disappears in the house, that's when they strike.
With more people enjoying the countryside during lockdown, there's been an increase in fly tipping and dogs worrying sheep. From incidents like these to organised theft of equipment worth tens of thousands of pounds, more is being done to crack down on rural crime.
It's all about raising the awareness, so we need people to be more vigilant. We need farmers to be talking to each other. We have seen a massive increase in dog attacks due to the pandemic, so it's about making the public aware, but also the farmers through increased signage and awareness in the general community of the impact this can have.
Farmers and the authorities say they're determined to work together to help protect their livelihoods and keep the countryside safe. Nicola McCalley, STV News.
An alliance of organisations is demanding that trawlers be banned from fishing within 3 miles of Scotland's coasts. Members from Our Seas Scotland say a limit on the practice would protect marine life and coastal communities. Brandon Cook has more.
Scotland's coastlines are renowned for their idyllic beauty. Fish caught in these waters are classed as some of the world's best. But while things seem calm on the surface, below there's a storm brewing. Stocks of certain marine life are dwindling, some say destroyed.
A decade of absolutely catastrophic declines.
Now more than 100 organisations under the name Our Seas Scotland are calling for trawling to be banned within 3 miles of the coastline.
We want to turn the assumption on its head that it's okay to trawl and dredge pretty much everywhere inside of 3 miles. And they have to prove why the areas they want to fish are ecologically appropriate to fish in that way. The reason that we want this to happen is because we're in the middle of an ecological crisis in our inshore waters that is going by pretty much unnoticed.
Trawling the seabed within 3 miles was banned, but the UK government overturned that in 1984. Campaigners say a modernised limit is not a radical measure and would benefit both the environment and coastal communities.
It's been demonstrated in other places all over the world that if we create marine protected areas and no-take zones, there's the ability for areas to recover fairly quickly.
The 3 mile limit was only ever introduced as a means of defining the territorial seas. It was never a fisheries management measure, and we don't believe that that's the right approach.
But the Scottish Fishing Federation disagree and claim there's no proof a limit would bring any environmental benefits.
I think what's important to recognise is that there are existing mechanisms for how we protect waters inshore, how we protect sensitive features and sensitive habitats, and we're fully engaged in these, and it's absolutely right that these are based on science and evidence, and that's the right way to do it, not a blanket imposition of a 3-mile limit.
With just 3 months to go until climate discussions are held in Glasgow, campaigners are pressing hard for action on what they feel is a threat to the very future of Scotland's inner waters. Brandon Cook, STV News.
A new footbridge to the East Beach at Lossiemouth has been approved by Moray councillors. A steel crossing will replace the existing century-old wooden link, which was declared unsafe and closed 2 years ago. The £1.8 million bridge should be in place by next spring. 10 multicoloured lighthouse sculptures painted by school children have been unveiled at the Aberdeen Science Centre. It's ahead of a wider charity trail launching next week with 50 larger models designed by local artists. Well, it's time for all the sport with Chris and news of more success at the Olympics.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sport, sponsored by Papa John's.
Good evening. It was a super silver Tuesday for Scots at the Tokyo Olympics, with 4 clinching a place on the podium. The women's and men's cycling team joined Argyll sailor Anna Burnett with their second place finishes, whilst on the track GEMMA just missed out. Sheila McLaren rounds up today's action.
Alarms were set early for family and friends of Anna Burnett at the Royal Northern and Clyde Yacht Club as they gathered before breakfast to watch the 28-year-old in action. And as she and partner John Gimson crossed the line to win silver in the mixed NACRA 17 class, her parents raised a glass to celebrate.
Slightly relieved that it's all over, but very, very happy and excited for them in particular. Yes, yeah.
Totally elated and still buzzing.
Attention then turned to the velodrome, and after breaking a world record in the team pursuit semi-final, Scots Katie Archibald and Nia Evans were part of the GB team in the final a few hours later. But ultimately Germany proved too strong and they had to settle for silver. There was also silver for Paisley's Jack Carlin. He was part of the men's team sprint trio, which finished behind Netherlands in the final. At the Olympic Stadium, Gemma Ricci came so close to a medal at her first ever Games, running a personal best in the 800 metres and missing out on bronze by 900ths of a second. Andrew Butchert booked his place in Friday's 5,000 metre final, finishing 7th in his heat. Elsewhere in diving, James Heatley finished 9th in the men's 3-metre springboard final. And in canoeing, Deborah Kerr came 8th in the women's kayak single 200 metres final.
Well, to football now, and Aberdeen and Scotland defender Andy Considine says he and his teammates aren't looking too far ahead despite their great start to the season. A comprehensive defeat of Swedes BK Häcken in Europe was followed by a comfortable victory over rivals Dundee United at the weekend. The Dons fly out to Iceland tomorrow morning to play Bleiderblik in the Europa Conference League on Thursday.
We're just kind of looking at it one game at a time. I think we know what we're up against on Thursday night, and it'll be tough. I think high tempo, high pressing team. So we know that we'll have our work cut out, but at the same time, over the years we've managed to produce some really good away performances, and it's going to require a solid 90 plus minutes, and hopefully we can grab a couple of goals and take it back to Pittodrie for the second leg.
Well, Rangers Champions League game against Swedes Malmo is already underway with just over 20 minutes played. It's Malmo 0, Rangers 0. Not many clear-cut chances so far. Now, Angus racing driver Sandy Mitchell mastered near impossible driving conditions to clinch his 4th successive podium at the Spa 24 Hours race in Belgium at the weekend. The Lamborghini Works driver from Forfar negotiated a torrential downpour in the final hour of racing, which saw a number of top drivers crash out to bring his Barwell Motorsport Huracan home in third place in the Pro-Am class. Now, a huge moment heading towards the famous high-speed corner Eau Rouge almost put paid to his team's success, but the 21-year-old wrestled back control of the aquaplaning car to cross the line for another podium finish.
Yeah, it started kind of going and veering off slightly to the right, and then I just had a little bit of steering in. So then when it came back to me, I had a few tank slappers and the steer. I had to have quick hands to save it, but thankfully I kept it pointing in the right direction. And I think there was another car that came down just after me, a McLaren, and I think that did a full 360 and just missed the wall. So there was definitely a few lucky but skilled moments in those rainy conditions, and I'm really surprised there wasn't more people going off.
Aquaplaning at 140 miles an hour. Not for me, that's all tonight.
Get your fill of the action. STV Sport, sponsored by Papa John's.
And now here's Sean with a look at the weather.
Now, if I ask you to think back to July, most of you won't be thinking of rain. However, of course, we had some pretty torrential downpours at times towards the end of the month in Aviemore. And believe it or not, it ended up our wettest July on record here, nearly 2.5 times what we'd normally expect. But as we head towards Argyll and Ayrshire, we've had our driest July on record. Machrahanish just 13% of what we'd normally expect for the month, and the most significant record, Auchencruve in Ayrshire, where our records go back 86 years. Now, things are going to change this week. You can forget dry conditions. Some heavy showers around. Let's have a look.
Blue skies and sunshine are in the forecast. TUI sponsors STV weather.
Well, we've still got a real soil moisture deficit in likes of Orkney, parts of the North Highlands and also the Western Isles, but that's going to change in the next couple of days. Plenty of showers on the way. Now, it is going to stay rather cloudy across western parts. Shower outbreaks of rain through much of this evening tonight. Most of the showers developing further east. A few of the heavy ones we've still got out there. It should ease away. It becomes dry. And again, like the last couple of nights, those temperatures, rather chilly values in some spots, into single figures. So tomorrow not looking too great, especially across Skye and the Western Isles, but of course some of these areas we do need that rain. So we've got that rain around through much of tomorrow. You can see some bright colours in here, so some of it will be on the heavy side. Drifting its way into the North Highlands. Lots of sunshine northern and eastern areas. But even here again, like today, across Murray, Aberdeenshire, the East Highlands, Angus and Perthshire, a few scattered showers developing, but certainly feeling quite nice in the sunshine with temperatures into the low 20s. Now, lots more showers around on Thursday, and again, some of those will be on the heavy side. Now, let's have a look at central and eastern parts first of all. Not too bad tomorrow, very few showers around. Lots more showers Thursday, and then on Friday and Saturday, some of those showers will be thundery. Now, we'll see showers in the north and the west of the country, but our showers here should be lighter and fewer and further between. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors STV weather.
And that's all for this Tuesday edition of the programme. Join me again for the late news updates at 10:30. You can see tonight's programme again on the STV player. For the moment, though, have a good evening.